What is going on, everybody? And in this video I'm going to be taking a look at the Bugatti Divo versus the lovely Proto Lucky-One, which I would have to say is still probably one of the best motor pass vehicles in the game, if not the best one we have ever seen for that matter. Now, I know a lot of players are probably going to say that, well, the Bugatti Divo is technically not the best Bugatti still, which that is true to a certain extent, because the Bugatti Supersport 300 basically took the hypercar class by storm, because this is probably going to be the best car in this class for a long time to come. The biggest thing about it is going to be the way this car can hit 300 plus miles an hour with no issues at all, when some of the other hypercars can barely hit like 280 without struggling. So the Bugatti's probably going to remain the king, but that does not make some of the other cars all that useless, to be honest. I would say even the Proto Lucky-One or even the Regera and some of these other hypercars are still very good options for pretty much most of the summits and all that. Unless it's a super long event and you have to slipstream like a friend or something, or you want to, that car is obviously going to be a better option. But I would say the Bugatti Divo is still going to be a really good car for any of the summits, because this vehicle is incredible. The way this thing handles, the way this car has a great top speed as well. So I wanted to do a comparison video against the Proto Lucky-One, because I would say many players are probably loving this car still to this day after that motor pass. I figured why not put them together and really see how they are different and or ways one might be better than the other. Now, I'm not going to lie, I personally would probably pick the Proto Lucky-One over the Divo in most of the events, because I really do like how this car drives, the handling ability of this thing, plus how this vehicle actually sounds, even though I do think this is actually a Bugatti with a different body kit on it. I'll get into that a little bit later. But I still think this is going to be one of the better cars to use, because the stability and handling, I think, on the Proto Lucky-One is probably going to be better than the Divo in many ways. But if you guys wanted to check out my build, I am running this on the Proto Lucky right now, which I will show the builds I'm running on the vehicles at the end if you guys did want to try out my settings. But I would definitely say to take another look at the Lucky-One. I know a lot of players are probably not going to use many of the other hypercars now, because unfortunately the Bugatti 300 is probably going to take over this class for a long time, but I've been having a really good time trying out some other vehicles here, and I've always wanted to put the Bugatti Divo versus the Lucky-One to see how they compare to each other, and it seems like they're going to be very similar, but also in some ways very different as well. So just in case you guys might have been wondering, by the way, I will also be running the exact same Nitro Chemist set on both of these vehicles as well, basically having extra pump and pure on both of them to do the top speed run and the race test as well. But first, let's go jump into the top speed test with the Bugatti, and then I do want to take a look at the Proto Lucky-One as well to see how these cars differ from each other with their top speeds. So now, starting off with the top speed run on the Bugatti Divo. So for this vehicle, I figured I would pretty much head over to the salt flats and run the Bugatti and the Proto over here, because this is basically going to be like the best place to actually test out the top speed of the vehicles because of the highway. I do know, depending on the highway you guys might be running, the car might seem faster than it is and or get to the speeds easier, and then other times the car struggles to get to like 300, which is kind of odd, but I guess this is how the game is going to work there. So a few things I have noticed when driving the Divo is, for one, this vehicle is obviously going to get up to speed quickly because, well, it is a Bugatti, and I have noticed a lot of the Bugattis are going to be amazing. You really can't go wrong with any of these cars in the game, to be honest. I mean, the 300 is obviously going to be the king at the moment, but the Divo is still going to be a very viable option on pretty much any of the summits. I still might end up running some of these cars in the future, because I still find them to be really fun to use. Even though they might not be as good as that car, I still think these things are pretty awesome. Now, let's see what we can get this car to get to. Get my nitrous all the way up here, hitting the nitrous here. Speed up, speed up. So 319 is going to be the max top speed on the Bugatti Divo, which is honestly going to be really good. The 300 does like 335 or something like that, so this car really isn't too far behind. So if you guys really wanted to, you could easily run this vehicle on summits and or races still. About 15 miles an hour is really not going to make much of a difference on a hyper race unless you guys are doing the long ones and you're slipstreaming somebody or something like that. But regardless, the top speed of the Divo is still going to be top tier. But let's move over to the Proto Lucky-One right now. So now, moving over to the top speed of the Proto Lucky-One, so I think we can all agree this is also one of the coolest looking cars in the game. I'm not gonna lie, I was kind of mixed on this thing when I first saw it, but it's really growing on me the more that I use it. But the only flaw I have with this vehicle is probably going to be the interior, looking like it's from an Android to an iPhone sending a picture. But besides that, I really can't complain about this vehicle. Now, one thing I found kind of funny about the Proto is the fact that I really did think this car is like another version of a Bugatti with how it sounds, but also the exhaust and all that is kind of similar to it. But I do think we can all agree the Proto is going to be one of those vehicles that are basically going to be the one car that everybody wants to come back. But unfortunately, I do not think Motor Pass vehicles will ever make a return, because that would honestly not make any sense because of the players who did grind for them. But let's see what this car can actually get to as a top speed. I have a feeling it's going to be a little bit lower than the Bugatti. but I do find the handling of this car to be way better than the Bugatti Divo in many ways, but I'll get a little more into that in the event here in a second. Let's get around this turn and crash here. What a great driver. So now, besides that crazy driving right there, which I did not go around that turn very well for that matter at all, let's see what the top speed of the Proto Lucky-One is now. So with Nitro Chemist, let's get on the flat surface over here. What is this car going to get to? So the top speed of the Proto Lucky-One's going to be around 307 miles an hour, which is still going to be very competitive for summits and or racing in general. I did notice the Bugatti actually did 320 miles an hour instead of 319, but it is just 1 mile an hour is not going to really make much of a difference anyway, but that is going to make the Divo 13 miles an hour faster than the Lucky-One. But the biggest question is, can the Lucky-One still hang with it? And to be honest, I would say the handling of this vehicle is going to be a little bit better than the Divo, which I'll get into that a little bit more when I take this car into a race test. But first, let's go jump into a race with the Bugatti Divo. So now jumping right into the Big Land Hyper Race with the Bugatti Divo here. So there's a few things I have noticed about this vehicle that still really make me like this car a lot. So as you guys did see before, the Bugatti hit around 320 on the highway, which is going to be really impressive with any hypercar. I noticed some hypercars can barely hit 300, some do like 290 or so. So for this vehicle to be able to actually hit 320 is going to be really impressive. It really doesn't put it too far behind the lovely 300 Super Sport in any way, but I would still say that car is going to be better for way longer races and all that because it gets up to speed so easily. But what's kind of insane to me is the fact that the Divo still seems to be really good in a lot of aspects, and even compared to the Proto Lucky, I would still say both of these cars are going to be great options if you guys were wondering. But there's a few things I do like about the Proto Lucky-One over the Bugatti, which I will get into that here in a second with that vehicle. But when it comes to the Bugatti, you really cannot go wrong with this vehicle in any way. I mean, this thing gets up to speed nicely. For example, doing over 300 miles an hour on this road right now with it. The handling of this vehicle is still going to be really good. Now, if you wanted to mess with the acceleration of this car a little bit, if you guys wanted to, you could lower the gearbox down like 1 or 2 points. Might help this car accelerate a little bit better. Similar to the 300 as well, because I have noticed the Bugattis might be a little bit slower with the acceleration. But then again, they have a really high top speed, so I guess it does kind of make sense in a way like that. Now, we all can agree that the Bugatti variants are probably getting kind of old in this game. Now, I would say a lot of players are probably not looking for any more Bugatti variants to come out, and even with the other ones in the game, which I do believe the Emerald Storm and the Magma might have been nerfed in some way a while ago, because jumping into those vehicles recently, I can definitely see a difference with them. And to be honest, if you guys did miss those cars, you're not really missing out on all that much unless you just like how they look. I would still say the regular Bugatti Divo can keep up with those cars all day long on any of these races here, with pretty much with no issues at all, because this vehicle can get up to speed with no issues. It handles really well, it has decent acceleration stock like that without messing with the gearbox, so you really cannot go wrong with this car in any way in that aspect. Is this going to be the best hypercar in the game? I would say it's going to be top tiered, similar to the 300 Super Sport, which that car is obviously going to be on the top at the moment, but with this car being 15 miles an hour slower than it, really isn't going to put this car too much below that one in any way, because this car can still keep up with it for the most part. And I would say, depending on how you guys actually drive the regular Divo compared to the Super Sport, you could probably still beat some of those vehicles on a lot of the events, because that car doesn't handle as good as this one does in any way. But let's jump right into the Proto Lucky-One, and I'll talk about that car a little bit more. So now jumping right into the Hollywood Hypercar Race with one of my favorite Motor Pass vehicles in the entire game. I don't know what it is, but the Proto Lucky-One has really grown on me a lot. Now, I do want to mention, by the way, guys, I was talking about the Super Sport 300 more than the actual Proto Lucky versus the Divo. And the main reason for that is I feel like a lot of people are just not going to choose anything but the 300 over the Divo. But even if you guys want to try out a different Bugatti, the Divo is still going to be a wonderful option. And versus the Proto Lucky-One, I'm going to have to say that car is probably going to be the better option over this vehicle. And the main reason for that is going to be the top speed and the way that car can handle. But one thing I noticed about the Proto Lucky-One is I'm going to say this car is going to have way better handling and stability than the Bugatti. And I might even go as far as saying this car might have some of the best handling and stability in this entire game. And the reason why I say that is the way this car can fly around a corner. It actually feels like it's sticking to the ground. We can all agree that some of the hypercars really do struggle way too much in some areas. For example, that was one of my biggest gripes with the 300 Super Sport, was if you hit the littlest bump, the car basically spins out and loses itself, which I have never seen the Proto ever do that. I'm actually going to admit this right now, guys. I'm going to probably say that the Proto is going to have like top 3 best handling in the entire hypercar class, because this vehicle has no issues around corners whatsoever. That is the one thing I do think it has over the Divo, is the stability and handling on this vehicle is honestly incredible to me. Like, No matter what you do, you can brake and downshift a little bit if you are running manual, and my goodness, this car will just eat that corner with no issues at all. It does get up to speed pretty dang quick as well using nitrous, and I really do like the 6 speed on this vehicle because I normally run manual, so being able to downshift and, fly into a corner and seeing this car grip around the corner is honestly incredible. I would definitely say the Proto is going to have amazing handling compared to many of the other hypercars. Now, sure, it might not have that crazy high top speed, only doing 307, not doing like 320, but that 13 miles an hour might not really make that much of a difference depending on the track you might be racing on, because I would say even like shorter races like this, the Proto could still beat the Divo in some ways, because this car is going to have a lot of speed to it still, just in other ways with going around corners and all that, which is still going to make a huge difference when racing on the Crew 2. But let me know what you guys think in the comments below, and I will also show you guys my settings for both of these vehicles right now. Let me know what car you guys like more and why, and thank you all so much for watching.